Hey guys, what's up? I'm Sergeant Teabag. I will be your host for Teabag Talks. This is a new podcast that I'm starting. And the reason I wanted to start this podcast is, well, I got bored. The semester's almost over. I got a few things to tidy up still, but I figured I'd start this just as a little side project. Maybe some of you will find some sort of enjoyment in my stories. But the first story that I kind of wanted to bring up to you guys is my ecology lab that I had to do for my biology course this semester. Now, our biology teacher, he's such a cool guy, and he's kind of the reason why I decided to pick up biology again completely, even though there's other issues with that now with the program that I'm trying to transfer into at U of I. That'll be another story for another time. We're going to focus on the biology ecology lab for now. So, he gives us this assignment to go out and find 20 different organisms around us. This could be at a forest preserve, this could be at home. I decided to incorporate a mix of all three because the populations of anything really, like an insect or an animal, won't really change within like 10 miles. If you're talking like within northern Illinois as a whole compared to southern, yeah, there's going to be pretty significant differences, but I live about 20 minutes out of Harper and about 30 minutes away from Deer Grove Forest Preserve, which is, I think, about, I don't know, 8, 9 minutes from Harper. So I decided to go to this forest preserve right next to the Fox River because it's closest to my house. And I didn't have very good luck in finding a lot of animals. And, well, the reason is because this was, I believe, the week before Thanksgiving break. So everything was falling apart. The grass was dying, the reeds were brown. There's clearly nothing to find in terms of like plant life that was alive and well. So I thought about it and I'm thinking, well, this is probably going to be a good time to find a lot of mushrooms. So at the Fox River Forest Preserve that I went to, there weren't mushrooms. However, I did find one cardinal, which was very elusive. If I do pull up a picture, you would just see this little red speck in between a bunch of branches. It's perfect camouflage for the fall. But I could hear him, I could see him, but every time I pulled out my fucking phone, he always flew away, and I don't know how he knew, because he wasn't even looking in my direction. He was looking to the north. And I was about 50 feet away from the tree that he was in, facing towards the east. And I have no idea how he knew, but I guess because there wasn't anything moving, he might have just detected the motion by default, and so he flew because he thought there was danger. I ended up finding no mushrooms at that forest preserve. I found that one cardinal, but didn't get a picture of it, at least a good one. I found these things called choke cherries that grow on these little like half trees or like 8, 9 feet tall. They were just all across the path that I took. And then there were also the black oaks that are really tall and drop these weird looking leaves. They kind of have like these little 7 points on them, and a lot of oaks are like that. So that's more another story for later again because I have a little I have a little tidbit where I have a difficulty trying to identify everything that I found. So I pack up my things. I only found a few organisms there. I think I heard a chickadee too, but I didn't see it. So I'm just thinking this is worthless. So I go home, pretty disappointed. And on the weekend, I believe a few days later, I decide to go to the Deer Grove Forest Preserve, and there was a lot more luck there, and less luck at the same time. The reason I say that is one of the first things I see is a downy woodpecker. And so, again, I pull out my phone trying to take a picture of it, and that fucker flies away from me as soon as I pull out my phone. Right as I pull it out, I'm ready to take a picture. I'm angling up right at it in the tree. It's not even looking at me. And he just decides, oh hey, this would be a great, this would be a great time to ruin a shot. And well, I didn't get a picture of a downy woodpecker. So I had to take one off the internet to use it. And I don't necessarily feel bad about that. And as much as I love my biology teacher, there was no way I was going to get another opportunity in finding a downy woodpecker again. birds are already pretty rare to find as it is. And I found this other species of woodpecker that I forgot what it was called, but it's got like these black wings with a white undercoat, and it looks really pretty. But I only found one of those, and again, bad angles on that one too. So I'm already feeling like I'm out of luck. And then there's these little areas with like prairie grass and stuff. There's just these plants that just are covered with these little white seeds. They kind of almost resemble dandelions with the way the seeds looked. But they obviously weren't dandelions. They're growing by a bunch of tall grass and I believe a cherry tree too, a sour cherry tree, mind you. So it's not like one of your classic cartoony little cherries growing on it. They would be just these bunches of cherries that are very tiny, just all clustered next to each other. I managed to find another American robin there, so that was a plus, I guess, that I even managed to find one. But I started walking on the path. I find all different sorts of plants, and even some that I didn't even know existed. With all the brambles that I had found, they were actually Pennsylvania blackberries, with this little weird looking plant. It almost kind of looked like a tomato plant, but instead, with sticks and not vines. Um, I guess they're called ground cherries, and they're these like pretty bright golden colored fruits that grow out of these little leaves that already withered away. I didn't grab one because I didn't know if it was edible or not, and upon looking it up later when I got home, they were edible, but it took me a good 20 minutes to find that out. Because again, it was the first time I had ever seen one of these things. It was just there on the side of the forest preserve path, just minding its own business. It's got these little berries hanging out. I'm like, there's some cool looking berries, but I don't want to eat it because it's probably poisonous. They're not, but I didn't want to take my chances. So on my way through the forest preserve, I also found, luckily, a few species of mushrooms. I found these little stumpy orange mushrooms called I believe, mycena mushrooms. There were the sulfur shells, which ironically are called the chicken of the forest. And I shit you not, when I was a good 20, 30 feet away from the tree that I found it on, taking a picture, it looked like fried chicken. And I thought I was losing my mind. I know that it was the second day that I'd started this project, but when I looked at it, I wasn't even hungry. Okay, I had eaten breakfast and everything before going out to the forest preserve, and I looked and I thought it was just a fried chicken leg hanging on the side of a tree. And this is coming from a fat man, but still, like this is very weird to me. I never really went out to the forest reserve in the fall, so when everything's dead and dying, that's when mushrooms come out the most. Mushrooms are very frequently known as decomposers in the food chain. So this is prime time for them, and I'm glad I came out at this time because I also found turkey tail mushrooms. Now, they weren't the most spectacular looking, but they did look kind of cool. They essentially look like a turkey's tail. They have these little banding patterns on the outsides of the mushroom towards like, the edge of it. And I thought it just looked cool. There were just hundreds of them dotting this fallen oak tree. And I thought this is pretty cool. But then I looked down and I saw those mycena mushrooms I mentioned earlier, and they looked so distinct. I didn't think I'd ever see so much orange in one spot besides the leaves that were already dying on the ground. And perhaps it's why those mushrooms sprouted up. Maybe they were just trying to, you know, do their role in nature, decompose things. But that's enough of that. I keep going through the forest preserve, and I found milkweed. Now, milkweed, as you all know, or might not know actually, monarch butterflies are supposed to feed off of milkweed. And upon doing some more research at home, there were two different types of milkweed that I found, but one of them, I guess, doesn't make the distinct pods, and the other one does. That, or I just got really lazy on my ecology project and just said, fuck it, this wildflower has to be this sort of milkweed. But I'm not necessarily sure if that's the case anymore. I always sort of doubt myself in that regard. But anyway, so I find these weird looking things. They just kind of look like elves' ears, just on a stick. And I didn't think anything of it, but there is this elderly man, and bless his heart, he told me that he goes to the forest preserve every day and had been for well over 2 decades. And I could tell because he had an eye for everything, and he knew the just the ecology of the entire forest preserve. I knew he would be able to help me out. And I told him that I was doing this project. Well, it's not really a project, but more just a weekly lab for my biology class. And so he helped me out. He told me that that woodpecker in the beginning was a downy woodpecker. And I don't know why, but I might have thought it was a red-bellied woodpecker just because of the red feathers on its head. But maybe that's just me being slow. But that's besides my point. So after doing my actual field research at the forest reserve, I go home. Well, first I pick up some rice from this place called Sizzling Walk. It's, I think, 5 minutes east of Harper in this little shopping plaza right next to that nightclub called Drink. Really good food. I'll tell you that right now. I've been going there for over 10 years with my mom and dad. They don't disappoint. And we just been loyal customers ever since my parents introduced me to them. Um, the way it happened is my mom used to work for Nation Pizza Products, and I believe she would go there just about every day for lunch. And so she knew the owner very well. But bless her heart, she, I believe, moved out to Taiwan. So it's a little dangerous there now, considering their situation with China. But I digress. I go home with the rice in hand, and I sit down and I start trying to identify these things. Now, what our biology teacher wanted us to do is he wanted us to find the taxonomy of each species that we had found there, namely just the genus and the species itself. So I had to go through my entire list of 20 organisms, and I think I found 24, but I couldn't identify a few. So I lucked out with the 20 that I found, for sure. Well, those ground cherries were very elusive. And I don't mean in nature, I mean on the internet. I could not find a name for them at all until I finally came across it. And when I thought that was bad, I was about to lose my goddamn mind trying to identify the difference between a pine tree, a spruce tree, and a fir tree. I'm not an ecology expert by any means. I'm basically just a sophomore in college that fucked up most of his life by just deciding to not go to college for a good 3 years right after high school. I guess I just wasn't ready. But again, another story for another time. At least I know I'll be able to provide some content to you guys. But it took me, I believe, an hour or so to identify the spruce tree in my front yard. And the reason I knew it was a spruce tree and not a fir tree is because the pine cones on this one in front of our house, the pine cones go down. On a fir tree, they grow up. But a pine tree has very long needles that are allegedly soft. The needles on a fir tree or a spruce tree are short and not in a clumped pattern. So I had to go through, I believe, 40 different species of spruce trees, and I couldn't really find any that matched it entirely. But I think the closest that I was able to get to was an Engelmann spruce. But again, that took me about an hour to accomplish. Engelmann, I guess, is German for, I believe, angel man or something like that. At least I think that's what my friend told me. She's very fluent in German, so I could probably just ask her again. Voice crack, sorry. And then after having to identify that tree, I struggled like hell to try to identify some of the wildflowers that I had found at the forest reserve. Now, it wasn't too bad because I guess scientists have a sense of humor. And so what I mean by that is some of the native bird species in that forest preserve are things called like I believe a white tufted titmouse and another bird. It's kind of like brown with these darker brown flecks all over it called a dick thistle. So that it brings me to this whole thing where scientists have this sense of humor going on. In Europe, you have these birds called great tits. In South America, you have blue-footed boobies. Now, To top things off, they even came up with this genus called Amorphophallus. Now, amorpho means without shape, and as you guess, phallus means it means penis. So the corpse flower in the botanical garden in Chicago belongs to the genus Amorphophallus, and I believe the species itself is Titanum. So, as you can imagine, when it blooms, it looks like a dick. I know, it's awesome, right? I love science. Just scientists in general have a sense of humor. So when it came to this wildflower compendium for my state specifically, I had to look through over 300 different species of wildflowers and try to identify a few that I found that day. It was not easy. I spent 3 hours looking through that thing, just going insane, slowly going insane, knowing that I probably wouldn't be able to identify anything that I had found in that compendium. But the only thing that made it a little better was the fact that I actually found this one native wildflower called pussy toes. Now, it's not as dirty as you think. The reason they call it pussy toes is I guess the person that discovered pussy toes thought it looked like a cat's toes, and it kind of does. I kind of see the resemblance. But of all things to name it, because you have cattail, right? And now you have pussy toes. On what planet, right? Besides this one, of course, on what planet would you ever name something pussy toes and expect people to not laugh? When I had first found this name, I had to show this to everybody. I couldn't fucking believe it myself. I didn't think that scientists would be this wild and decide, hey, I'm going to name this thing something really funny that everyone's going to laugh at years in the future. Because I guess, pussy's a pretty funny thing to say. So it goes back to the whole thing with, naming different genuses like fucking, oh, right, pine trees. Pine trees, their genus name is, well, I'm not necessarily sure how you'd say it in Latin, but I'm pretty sure it's said as Pinus, like Pinus. And you can probably guess where I'm going with that, but I'm going to cut myself off right there. Eventually, I do find a different species of milkweed that I guess might have grown where I looked. I forget the name of it exactly, but it was this very tall, about 3-4 foot plant that was covered in all these flowers. Apparently, they get very beautiful in the spring. That's when they bloom. And I guess it might have been that. I don't know exactly. But once I finally decided enough is enough, I said, fuck it. I'm going to put down this genus name with the species and just call it a night. I felt so exhausted, and I still had, I believe, 4 biology lectures to do because, as you know, I love procrastinating. I'm a dumbass. Now, if you're on your way to college or you're currently in college, don't do what I do and procrastinate until the weekend. Because I guarantee you, sometimes I don't have enough time to do things on the weekend. And that's kind of where things get a little dicey, is when you're running out of time to do an assignment like I was this weekend in particular. I think I actually ended up finishing one of my assignments with 3 minutes to go on the submission deadline. So I wasn't particularly happy with that. I definitely don't want to do it again, but knowing my dumbass, I'm definitely going to do it again. 100%. And it's not like I don't like procrastinating, but, I'll give you another reason eventually as to why I like procrastinating. But I got a bit of a corny joke for you now that we're on the topic of ecology. So, what is the most affectionate fish in the entire world? A cuttlefish. I'm sorry. I I've had just this sort of obsession with dad jokes for the last few months, especially once I started learning how to cook. My dad told me that in order to properly be a dad that knows how to grill, you need to blast your fucking corridos, you need to have a beer in hand, and you need to be grilling with the other. Now, it's almost the middle of winter. Well, the start of winter, technically. I don't have a grill that can either sustain 60-mile-an-hour winds like there are tonight, or 20-degree weather. I don't like grilling outside when it's 40 degrees as is. And I'm pretty sure in that kind of weather, it would just be nearly impossible to grill without being at least a little uncomfortable, or the meat just wouldn't be getting cooked properly. So, no grilling for Teabag this winter. I'd love to. I mean, I have cast iron skillets inside, but it's not really the same. When you hit meat directly with fire, it just gives it a different taste. But that's enough of the dad jokes. I think this would be a good time to wrap up the podcast. This is the first episode, so I know things are a little all over the place. Hopefully, with the next few episodes, I might provide a little more structure, but at the same time, I don't know if this is going to be a consistent thing or not. So it's just going to be on my own time in my free time. And that was a really strong gust of wind. I heard that. Holy crap. I actually felt it shake my wall a little bit. But that's enough of my shenanigans. I am Sergeant Teabag, your host of Teabag Talks, and I will see you all another time.